The morning he disappeared, sun had barely started to peek through the blinds when Sundar Pichai stepped barefoot into his kitchen. The house was quiet, the kind of stillness that makes the smallest sound seem louder. He poured himself a cup of tea, letting the gentle steam rise into his face. He glanced around the sleek, modern kitchen, perfectly organized, but something felt missing. He didn't know what it was just yet. The silence wasn't comforting this morning. It felt off. Usually by now, a soft tapping of paws would echo down the marble hallway, but there was no sound. No gentle bark, no tail thudding against the wall. Sundar tilted his head slightly, listening harder. Romeo? He called out softly. Nothing. He called again, this time louder, walking to the back door that opened to a wide green garden stretching into the hills of Palo Alto. It was a quiet, private property, one of the few luxuries he allowed himself after years of hard work. And in that peaceful home, his golden retriever, Romeo, had been his constant companion for almost 8 years. But this morning, Romeo was gone. Sundar's brows furrowed. He stepped out onto the porch, bare feet brushing. Cool stone, the air was crisp, fresh dew clung to the grass. Everything looked normal, too normal. He whistled, the sound cutting across the yard. Romeo. Breakfast boy. Still, nothing got the pit in his stomach deepened. He walked toward the side gate. It was closed, but not latched. A small swing in the gate made it clear that someone or something hadn't locked it properly. Sundar's chest tightened. He crouched, examining the ground. Soft paw prints led out the gate and into the nearby wooded trail that bordered the property. He stood slowly. The steam from his tea long gone, his heart now beating faster. How could this happen? He always made sure the gate was closed. His staff knew how important Romeo was to him. It wasn't just a dog, it was the creature that had seen him through late nights of work, that had laid by his side when he lost his father, that had wagged its tail in silent understanding when he doubted himself. Romeo had been there before. The world saw him as the Google CEO. Back then, he was just a tired man with a dream and a dog who never judged him for missing dinners or being too quiet. And now, he was missing. Sundar called out again, walking through the woods. The trail was uneven, stones and branches scattered like forgotten memories. He walked for what felt like hours, stopping every few feet to call his name. But the only response was the rustling of birds and the gentle hum of morning insects. Romeo was nowhere. He returned home around noon. The staff had arrived, and one of them noticed the look on his face immediately. Sir. Is everything all right? Sundar shook his head. Romeo's missing. Check the cameras. Check the gate. I need to know when he left. Within minutes, they pulled up the footage. It was grainy, but the timestamp said it all. 2:37 a.m. The camera facing the gate showed Romeo nudging the side gate with his nose. It gave way. He hesitated for a few seconds, then slowly walked out into the darkness. Alone. Sundar stared at the screen, trying to understand. Why would Romeo leave? He wasn't the type to wander. Then something strange caught his eye. A shadow, far off in the background of the frame, just before Romeo pushed through the gate. It looked like movement. A figure, maybe. Too far to tell. He leaned closer, paused, replayed. It was gone. He rubbed his eyes. Maybe he was imagining things, but that's when the worry turned into something colder. Sharper. This wasn't just a lost dog. There was something else going on. The next few hours were a whirlwind. Posters were printed. His team began combing the nearby trails. Sundar made calls to local animal shelters, to security services, even to a few trusted friends in tech who offered drones and thermal cameras. Nothing was too much when it came to finding Romeo. By evening, he sat on the front steps of his home, staring at the horizon as the sun dipped low. His wife, Anjali, stepped out beside him. She put a gentle hand on his shoulder. We'll find him, she whispered. Sundar didn't respond. He couldn't. He was replaying every moment of the last few days. Had he been too busy? Had Romeo been trying to get his attention? Had he missed a sign? He remembered last night Romeo had been unusually restless, pacing the house, barking softly at the front door. Sundar had shushed him, thinking it was just the wind. He now regretted not getting up to check. Doda and JL, I sat beside him. Do you think someone took him? He looked at her slowly. I don't know, he whispered. But something doesn't feel right. That night, Sundar barely slept. He lay awake, staring at the ceiling, his mind racing. The house felt empty. Hollow. Every corner reminded him of Romeo, his bed, the chew toys, the water bowl still half full. But then, just after 3 a.m., his phone buzzed. He sat up quickly. The message was from a number he didn't recognize. Your dog is safe. He'll return when the time is right. Sundar stared at the message. His hands trembled. No signature. No name. No location. Just that one message. He quickly called the number. It rang once, then went straight to voicemail. His breath caught in his chest. Who would send something like that? And how did they know it was his dog? His number wasn't public. Not even his staff had it saved in any exposed way. The silence in the room grew heavier. Was Romeo taken? Was this some kind of threat? Or was it something deeper? Something more mysterious? Sundar stood up, walked over to the window and looked out into the darkness. The hills were quiet. The trees swayed gently in the breeze, but now they didn't feel peaceful. They felt like they were hiding something. He whispered into the silence. Romeo, ... Where are you, boy? And somewhere far away, deep in the woods, a soft bark echoed. But Sundar didn't hear it. Asterisk, the message in the night next morning came like a fog. Heavy and dull, as if the sky itself carried the same weight that had settled in Sundar's chest. The light in the bedroom filtered through sheer curtains, but it didn't bring warmth. Sundar sat on the edge of his bed, still wearing the same clothes from the night before, staring at the last message on his phone. Your dog is safe. He'll return when the time is right. The words looped in his mind like an unfinished song. They weren't threatening. They weren't pleading. They felt calculated, as if someone wanted him to feel a mix of hope and helplessness at the same time. And that made it worse. And JL, I walked in quietly, holding a cup of tea, her eyes puffy. From lack of sleep, she didn't say anything at first. Just handed him the cup and sat beside him. Any reply? She asked softly. Sundar shook his head. Nothing. She reached out, held his hand. Maybe it's someone trying to comfort you. Maybe it's just someone who saw your post and thought they were helping. He turned to her. How would they get my number, Anjali? This isn't someone random. A silence followed. The kind that says more than words ever could. The truth was, Sundar had spent years protecting his private life. Being one of the most recognized faces in the tech world had taught him how important boundaries were. Only a handful of people had his direct number. Even fewer had been inside his home. And none of them, he believed, would play with something this personal. So why did this feel targeted? He stood up slowly, walked to the window, and stared out again into the yard where Romeo once chased butterflies and barked at squirrels. Now it just looked like a patch of grass and stone. Lifeless. Then he noticed something new. A small, folded piece of paper pinned to the tree near the gate. He rushed downstairs, barefoot, heart racing, and jogged to the tree. It was carefully tucked beneath a wooden splinter, just at eye level. He pulled it out. No envelope. Just a note, handwritten black ink. Don't worry. He was never lost. He's on a journey. So are you? Sundar's fingers tightened around the paper. He looked around. Nothing. No signs of movement. The street was quiet. No cars. No people. Just that note, deliberately placed. He hurried back inside, handed the paper to Anjali, who read it with wide eyes. Who's doing this? She asked, her voice trembling slightly. This is starting to feel strange. Sundar didn't respond. Instead, he picked up the house phone and called the private security firm that monitored their property. They dispatched 2 agents immediately, both ex-military, both trained in tracking and surveillance. He wasn't taking any more chances. By late morning, they had scoured the area. No footprints, no fingerprints on the note, no tire marks, nothing. Whoever had left that message knew exactly what they were doing. But something even more unsettling. came up during the sweep. The security agent, Jordan, a tall, calm man with sharp eyes, pulled Sundar aside. "Sir, I checked the footage again," he said quietly. "The timestamp on the camera shows Romeo leaving the gate at 2:37 a.m., right?" Sundar nodded. "But I pulled footage from a drone we flew over your property the night before as a routine scan. It's just part of our weekly route. And something's off." He handed Sundar a tablet. The footage played smoothly, showing the perimeter of the house, thermal images of animals in the distance, trees swaying gently. Then, at exactly 2:20 a.m., something flickered on the screen. A figure. A human figure. Standing at the edge of the property. Still. Watching. Not moving for almost 10 minutes. And then. Gone. No vehicle. No exit path. Just. Disappeared. Sundar's throat tightened. Could it be a trespasser? Jordan shook his head. No signs of entry. No break-ins. They stayed outside the property line, almost like they wanted to be seen, but not caught. The tension in Sundar's chest grew heavier. "Keep someone posted outside the house," he said, "and check every trail around this area." That evening, he canceled all meetings. Even a video conference with a major Asian client was pushed. For the first time in years, he didn't care about product launches or keynote speeches. All he could think about was the soft golden fur and those trusting brown eyes that had followed him for nearly a decade. It was more than losing a pet. It was like misplacing a part of his soul, while the house buzzed with quiet investigations and silent concern. Sundar retreated to his study. A room lined with books and awards, filled with memories of interviews, patents, and progress. But none of those mattered now. On his desk was a small framed photo, a candid picture of him laughing with Romeo on the beach. Both of them soaked and sandy. He stared at it for a long time. Then the phone buzzed again. A second message. This one was longer. "You built a world, full of logic and numbers, but some truths are beyond code. He knows where he's going. Follow the trail, Sundar. And maybe you'll find more than him." This wasn't random anymore. This was personal. This was deliberate, and it was guiding him toward something. He replied this time. "Who are you? Where is he?" Delivered. Read. But no response. He stared at the message until his screen dimmed. The next morning, something strange happened. An envelope arrived by courier. No return address. Just his name printed in clean block letters. Inside was a single Polaroid. Romeo. Sitting by a lakeside. Unharmed, healthy, his head tilted with that curious expression he always wore when Sundar spoke to him. But in the corner of the photo, barely visible, was something else. A man, or at least a shadow of one, standing in the trees. Face hidden. Watching. And at the bottom of the photo, written in the same handwriting as the note, "Day 2. Anjali gasped when she saw it. "He's alive." But what does this mean? Sundar felt his pulse quicken. Someone had him, but not in a cage, not in distress. It was like they were taking him somewhere, a journey. But why? And why Romeo? Then Sundar noticed something else. In the photo, beyond the lake, was a familiar outline. A ridge, a peak he knew from years ago. His breath caught. It was Mount Pei. A quiet hiking trail 2 hours away. He had gone there once, years before. Romeo, before his rise in the tech world. He had stood on that ridge, broken and confused, right after his first startup had failed. He had stood there, watching the world below, wondering if he had made the biggest mistake of his life, leaving India. And now, somehow, the dog he loved more than anything was there. Sundar stood up, grabbed his coat. Anjali looked at him. "Where are you going?" "I need to find that lake," he said. She grabbed his arm. "You're not going alone." He nodded. They drove for 2 hours, winding roads and deep forests, guiding them toward the peak. The closer they got, the more Sundar felt something stir in his chest. Not just worry, but memory, reflection, kind of nostalgia soaked in longing, and regret. When they reached the trailhead, the sky was painted in gold and violet. The scent of pine filled the air. They hiked for 30 minutes, reaching a quiet clearing, and there it was the lake still silent but empty no Romeo no sign of. The man but on the tree right where the photo was taken, another note was pinned. You getting closer. But this isn't just about him. It's about what you forgot. Come back tomorrow. Come alone. Anjali read it and stepped back. This is starting to scare me, Sundar. He stared at the paper, then looked at the lake again. It wasn't fear. In his heart, it was something else. A quiet knowing. Who read Romeo? They weren't hurting him. They were teaching Sundar something. But what? Asterisk, the man beneath the pinnace the next morning was colder than usual. Clouds moved in like whispers across the sky, dimming the early light. Sundar stood at the edge of his driveway, watching as Anjali's car disappeared around the corner. She had begged him not to go alone, but the note was clear. Come back tomorrow. Come alone. He wasn't afraid. He was curious, because somewhere in his heart, something was shifting. Like a memory long buried under routines, expectations, and deadlines was beginning to stir. It was strange how one missing dog could unlock so much in a man. But it wasn't just Romeo. It was everything Romeo represented. Patience. Unconditional love. The kind of companionship that doesn't demand anything, just exists beside you, through your best and worst and now that presence was guiding him somewhere. Somewhere familiar yet unfamiliar. He drove in silence, taking the same road as yesterday, but this time it felt different. He noticed things he hadn't before. The way the morning mist wrapped around tree trunks like blankets. How the golden leaves clung to the last of summer before fall claimed them. Each detail tugged at his thoughts like a gentle hand. The parking lot at the trailhead was empty when he arrived. No hikers. No cars. Just the crunch of his boots on gravel. He walked up the winding trail again, the forest closing around him. Tall redwoods stood like ancient guardians. The wind whispered through them, almost like voices. For a moment, Sundar felt small, not as the CEO of a global company, not as a man with responsibilities stacked on his shoulders, but as a boy. The kind of boy who once looked at the stars and believed in stories. He reached the lake, got the same stillness, the same silence, and then he saw him, a man, sitting by the water's edge on a weathered log, facing the lake. Motionless. Sundar's single quotes as heart jumped there at the man's feet, curled into a gentle circle. Was Romeo. His fur looked clean. His tail flicked once in recognition. But he didn't get up. He just watched Sundar approach, eyes calm, as if he knew this was how it was supposed to unfold. The man didn't turn around. You came, he said, a voice low, calm, almost gentle. Sundar stopped a few feet behind him. Who are you? A long pause. The man finally turned his head halfway. He was older, maybe late 60s, weathered skin, deep eyes that looked like they had seen too much and said too little. His clothes were simple, a worn jacket, boots that had clearly walked many roads. Nothing about him screamed danger. Yet everything about him felt deliberate. You don't recognize me, do you? The man asked with a faint smile. Sundar stepped closer, eyes narrowing. Then the man lifted a hand slowly and pointed to a scar on his cheek, a thin line, barely noticeable. And suddenly, Sundar remembered. A memory flooded in. Decades ago. He was a student in Chennai, young, awkward, always buried in books. One day, during a rare outing with friends, he had wandered into a quiet cafe on the outskirts of town. And there, a man was sitting alone, bleeding from the cheek, having been robbed. No one helped. No one asked, except Sundar. He had torn his notebook, wrapped the man's wound with paper, and offered him water. They exchanged no names, just eyes. Just that quiet moment of kindness. And now, that man stood before him again. You? Sundar breathed. Stunned. The man smiled softly. I never forgot that day. People walked past me, but you stopped. You saw me. Sundar was speechless. The man continued. You helped me when I had nothing. And over the years, I watched you rise. From afar, always silently. Not as a stalker. Not with obsession. Just admiration. I saw what you built, what you became. But along the way, I also saw what you started to lose. Sundar felt his throat tighten. What do you mean? The man nodded toward Romeo. He saw it too. The wind picked up. The lake shimmered under the gray sky. You stopped listening, the man said. To yourself. To the world. To your own heartbeat. You moved so fast, so high you forgot the ground beneath you. I didn't take him. He came to me. He led me. Here. Like he knew you needed to come back. Sundar was silent. The man patted Romeo gently. He waited at your gate that night, barking, pacing. Not because he was scared, but because he knew it was time. Animals know. They feel when something's wrong, when someone they love is drifting. Tears welled up in Sundar's eyes. He crouched, reached out slowly. Romeo looked up at him. Not with fear, not with hesitation, but with a calm understanding. He stepped forward, licked Sundar's hand. Sundar buried his face in Romeo's fur, holding him tightly. I'm sorry, he whispered. I'm so sorry. The man watched quietly. After a long moment, Sundar stood. Why now? Why bring him here? The man looked at the lake. Because sometimes the world gives us signs, but we ignore them until something we love walks away. And then we follow. And in that journey, we find parts of ourselves we didn't know we lost. Sundar wiped his eyes. Who are you really? The man chuckled. Just a man who once needed help and was saved by a boy with a kind heart. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small envelope. This is for you. Sundar opened it. Inside was a letter, handwritten. The words were simple. Kindness echoes across time. One good act can ripple through decades. Remember who you were before the world taught you who to be. Sundar folded the letter slowly. How did you know? Where I lived? The man smiled. I didn't. He did. He pointed at Romeo again. I live near here. Off the grid. No phone. No internet. That night, he came to my cabin, wet, tired, hungry. I opened the door and he walked right in. Curled up by the fire like he belonged. Sundar laughed through his tears. That sounds like him. He stayed 2 nights, the man said. Each night, he'd stare at the door, like he was waiting, but not to leave. To bring someone back, someone who needed to sit, to breathe, to remember. A heavy silence filled the space between them. Then the man stood. You should go. Take him home. But don't forget what this was. Sundar nodded. I won't. They shook hands. Nothing more was said. As Sundar turned to leave, Romeo by his side, the man called out once more. Remember, sometimes losing something is the only way to find everything. As Sundar walked down the trail, the forest felt lighter, the air softer, and in his chest, something opened, a space that had been closed for years. Not because he lacked success, but because he had forgotten silence, presence, and the importance of the little moments. He looked down at Romeo. You brought me back, didn't you? He whispered. Romeo wagged his tail. But just as they reached the car, Sundar's phone buzzed. A new message. You found him. Now I'll find yourself. There was no number. No contact. Just the words. Sundar stood frozen, because even though Romeo was back, something else was beginning. Asterisk, the trail with Imp House felt different when they returned. The walls hadn't changed. The furniture was exactly where they had left it. The scent of morning chai still lingered faintly in the kitchen, but everything felt softer, as if the silence that once pressed down on the rooms had been lifted. Romeo walked in ahead of Sundar, his paws pattering across the tile, tail swaying in a calm rhythm, not hurried, not afraid, just home. Anjali rushed to the door the moment she heard the car pull up. She dropped the book she was holding and ran down the steps barefoot, her voice caught somewhere between joy and disbelief. Romeo? She called, voice trembling, when the dog bounded toward her with gentle excitement. She fell to her knees, wrapping her arms around his neck. Tears slipped down her cheeks. You're okay? She whispered, stroking his fur again and again. You're okay? Sundar stood a few behind them, watching, quiet. She looked up at him, her eyes red. How did you find him? He hesitated, then said he found me. She blinked, confused. He walked past her through the open door, stepping into the house that suddenly felt more alive than it had in days. As Romeo settled into his favorite corner near the fireplace. Sundar stood over the kitchen sink, letting the water run through his hands. The cold shocked him back into the present. The man by the lake, the notes, the voice on the trail, it all lingered in his mind like fog that wouldn't lift. A-N-J-A-L. I came up behind him. What happened out there? He shut the tap and turned. I met someone. Someone from long ago. Someone I helped. Once. And now he helped me. She studied his face. Do you trust him? Sundar nodded slowly. I do, not because of what he said, but because of what I felt. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out the letter the man had given him. He placed it on the counter. Anjali picked it up and read the line aloud. Kindness echoes across time. One good act can ripple through decades. Remember who you were before the world taught you who to be. She looked at him. He wrote this for you? Sundar nodded. She folded the paper slowly, hands trembling. This is strange. Beautiful, but strange. He sat down at the kitchen table, elbows resting on the wood, palms clasped. I think it's more than that. I think something's trying to remind me of who I was, of who I forgot to be. He looked at her, eyes sincere. When was the last time we had dinner without me checking emails? She smiled faintly. Months. When was the last time I went to the park with you and the kids? I don't remember. He leaned back in the chair, guilt pressing into his chest. I've spent years chasing everything, building everything. But somewhere along the way I stopped, seeing what was already mine. She walked over and placed a hand on his shoulder. You're here now, and that's what matters. They sat in silence, the kind that doesn't need to be filled. Only felt. But just as peace began to settle into the house, Sundar's phone buzzed again. One message. The journey isn't over. The next step is yours. His chest tightened. There was no name. No number. Again. A-N-J-L. I looked over his shoulder. Is it him? Sundar nodded. Double quotes. What does it mean? He stared at the message. I don't know, he whispered. But I think I'm supposed to find out. He walked to the study, turned on his computer, and opened a blank document. The screen glowed in the dim light. The cursor blinked, waiting. He began typing slowly. Day 1. And then he stopped. His mind drifted to the past. To the boy who once stayed up all night, learning circuits and algorithms. To the teenager who skipped school to fix a broken transistor radio. To the son who promised his mother he would make something of himself, not for pride, but for purpose. He thought about that promise. He thought about whether he had kept it. Then his phone. But got not buzzed, got rang. He froze at the caller. It simply read. Unknown. He answered. A pause. Then a voice. Soft. Familiar. You're not done yet, Sundar. His throat dried. Who is this? The voice continued. You remembered something. But there's more, something deeper. Something you left behind a long time ago. It's time to face it. Face what? The voice didn't answer that. Instead, it said, you'll know where to go next when you stop looking at the screen and start looking within. Then the call ended. He stared at the phone. Njal. I walked in. What happened? He looked up at her. I think I need to go home. We are home. He shook his head slowly. No, I mean, India. She blinked. Why? He exhaled, the words falling out as if they'd been trapped inside for years. Because there's something there. Something I buried. Someone I forgot. The next morning, Sundar booked a flight. He didn't tell anyone at work. Not the board. Not the press team. Not even his assistant. Just packed a bag, told his family he'd be gone for a few days, and left. As the plane soared above the clouds, he stared out the window. Romeo's photo on his phone screen. The same one from the lakeside. But now it meant something more. Romeo wasn't just a dog. He was the thread that had pulled him back through a tangled maze of success. Ambition, and forgetting Dot and now, the thread was pulling again, Dot tugging toward something unfinished. When the plane landed in Chennai, the heat wrapped around him like an old blanket. The air was thick with scent, spices, dust, life. And beneath all of that, memories. He didn't head to the fancy hotel he usually stayed at Dot instead. He rented a small car and drove himself, away from the city, into the village where he was born. As he passed old rice fields and rickety stalls, something inside him shifted. The streets looked smaller now, but the feelings they carried were huge. The same tea stand where he'd saved every rupee to buy one cup. The temple where his mother once prayed for him before every exam. The dusty schoolyard where he first learned to dream. He parked near a narrow alley and stepped out. At the end of that path was a house. His childhood home. It was smaller now, older, cracked in places, but still standing. He walked slowly. A neighbor sitting on the steps recognized him and gasped. "You came back?" He smiled softly, nodding. Inside the house, it was quiet. The new tenants let him in without question. They knew who he was. They had honored the home, kept it clean, preserved the tiny prayer room where his mother once lit candles. Every morning. But it wasn't the house he had come to see. It was what it held. In the far corner of the bedroom beneath. Loose floorboards that only he and his father had ever known was a box. He crouched, lifted the plank, and pulled it out. Dusty. Unopened for over 20 years. Inside were old notebooks, yellowed photos, a letter from his father, and a small locket, his mother's. He held it in his hand, breath catching in his throat. And suddenly, he remembered. It wasn't just ambition that drove him. It was a promise. A promise whispered into his mother's ear on her deathbed. "I'll build a world where no child goes unheard. No boy feels invisible. I'll be more than just successful. I'll be kind." But somewhere along the way, the noise had drowned out the whisper. He closed his eyes. Sat on the floor. And wept. But not from pain. From release. From remembering. He spent hours there. No phone. No Wi-Fi. Just silence. And the sound of old wood breathing with him. When he finally stepped back outside, the sky was a deep orange. The sun setting behind coconut trees. His phone buzzed again. One final message. "Now you're ready." He looked around. No one. Just the village, the warmth, the sky, and a heart that had found its rhythm again. But little did he know, the final twist was yet to come. Asterisk, the voice from the shadows. Flight back to California was long, but Sundar barely noticed. He stared out the window for most of it, his thoughts tangled somewhere between the rice fields of Chennai and the winding roads near Mount Tamalpais. The photo of Romeo at the lake was still in his jacket pocket, folded and creased. Next to it was the locket he had retrieved from his childhood home, his mother's final gift, untouched for decades and now resting in his palm like a heartbeat from the past. He had gone looking for his dog, had found his younger self, and still, there was something missing, something unresolved. The journey didn't feel finished. When the plane touched down and the wheels screeched against the tarmac, reality pressed itself against the windows. Emails were already stacking up. Missed calls, meeting requests, news headlines speculating about his absence. But for once, Sundar didn't care. Asterisk, he turned off his phone. As he drove back through the familiar streets of Palo Alto. The houses looked smaller, the trees more vivid. Maybe nothing had changed. Or maybe everything had within him. He pulled into the driveway. Romeo's paws appeared in the window before he even opened the door, tapping excitedly against the glass. When the door swung open, the dog leapt forward, his tail wagging so hard it knocked over a basket of shoes. Sundar knelt and embraced him, whispering, "I missed you too, boy." Anjali stood a few feet behind them, arms crossed, watching with a strange look on her face. He rose slowly. "You're quiet," he said. She handed him a small envelope. "This arrived yesterday. No return address. Hand-delivered." He opened it carefully. Inside was a single sentence, written in the same handwriting as the other notes. "Look under the tree where he used to wait for you." Sundar felt his breath hitch. Without saying another word, he walked into the backyard. The tree in question was an old maple that stood tall near the garden's edge. Romeo used to sit beneath it every evening, waiting for Sundar to come home, no matter how late, no matter how tired. He'd be there, tail wagging, ears perked, like a silent guardian. The soil near the roots had been disturbed. Not much. Just enough for someone to notice. He knelt down, brushing aside leaves, and saw a small wooden box, hand-carved, plain. He opened it. Inside was a flash drive. Nothing else. He stood slowly, holding it in his palm, heart pounding. He returned inside, plugged it into his laptop. A single video file appeared. Open underscore when underscore use single quotes re underscore ready.mov. He clicked it. The screen flickered. Then a face appeared. The man from the lake. Older. Same jacket. Same calm eyes. He spoke directly to the camera. If you're watching this, it means you followed the path. It means you chose to remember who you were before the world told you who to be. And that means you're ready. He paused. Then continued. This isn't just about you, Sundar. This is about what people like you represent. What you build. What you influence. You've stood on global stages, launched ideas that touched billions. But the question is, did you ever stop to ask what it cost? Sundar leaned in, eyes narrowed. Do you remember a man named Ashwin? The man on the video asked. Sundar froze. The name hit him like cold water. SW. He remembered. A young engineer. Brilliant, eager, kind. 10 years ago, Ashwin had been part of a project team at Google, one of the brightest minds Sundar had ever seen. He came from a poor background, worked 2 jobs to pay his way through school. He had ideas that could have changed everything. But he also had a problem. He asked too many questions. He challenged the system. He slowed things down. And eventually, Sundar had let him go. Not with cruelty. Not with intention. Just with efficiency. The project moved on to SAWIND quotes T. He left tech. Disappeared from the scene. He was my nephew. The man on the video said, his voice quieter now. You helped me once, long ago, and I never forgot. But Ashwin, he needed someone to believe. And him, and you turned away? I don't blame you. We all make decisions. But I made one too. The man's expression changed. I wanted to show you what it feels like when something precious is taken. Not to hurt you, but to make you feel, to make you stop, to make you remember. Because the world doesn't need more innovation. It needs more compassion. He leaned closer to the camera. Romeo was never in danger, but you were, from yourself. The screen went black. Sundar stared at it for a long time. He felt his knees weaken, so he sat down slowly on the floor, right there. Beside his dog. Tears welled in his eyes. He hadn't thought about him in years. Not because he didn't care, but because he didn't make space to. The man was right. In building the future. Sundar had stopped pausing to look back, to make sure no one was left behind. He picked up his phone. Searched for ASHWIN. Nothing. He tried again. LinkedIn, email archives, old project folders. And then there it was. A mailing address. Outdated, but real. He dialed a contact. I need to find this man, he said. Ashwin Venkatesh. It's urgent. Yes, sir, the assistant replied. May I ask why? Sundar looked down at Romeo, who sat beside him, quiet, watching, waiting, just like always. Because it's time I made something right. 2 days later, he stood in front of a modest library in Fresno. Small town. Quiet streets. The kind of place people fade into when the world forgets their name. He walked through the doors. Asked the front desk about ASHUW, but the woman behind the counter smiled. He's in the children's section. Volunteers here every week. Sundar followed the sound of laughter, and there he was. ASWIN. Older. A beard now. Glasses. Sitting on the floor with a circle of kids. Reading a story with voices and gestures. The children were captivated. And then He looked up. Their eyes met for a moment. The room stood still. Ian slowly rose. Uncertain, Sundar walked over, heart thudding. I didn't come here as a CEO, he said softly. I came as a man who forgot to say sorry. Ashwin stared at him. Then, quietly, you remembered me? Sundar nodded. Double quotes. I remembered everything. The two men stood there in silence. Then Ashwin extended his hand. Sundar took it. Handshake that closed a gap 10 years wide. Outside, Sundar sat on a bench near the parking lot. Romeo lying at his feet. He sat beside him. They spoke for hours about old dreams. New ones. The mistakes that haunt us. And the kindness that saves us. And for the first time in a very long time, Sundar didn't feel like a man trying to prove anything. He just felt human. But as they got up to leave, something unexpected happened. A car pulled into the lot. A black SUV. A man stepped out. The man from the video. The man from the lake. Sundar froze. So did Ashwin. You came. The man said, smiling gently. Why? Sundar asked. Why do all this? Why not just talk to me directly? The man walked closer. Because sometimes words don't teach. Journeys do. He reached into his coat and handed Sundar a final envelope. Open this when you're ready. To choose what kind of legacy you want to leave. Then he turned. Got in the car. And disappeared. Just like that. Sundar looked down at the envelope. His fingers trembled because he knew this wasn't the end. This was the moment before everything. Change. Asterisk. The choice that changed everything. It took Sundar nearly an hour to open the envelope. He sat in the quiet of his car. Parked just outside the Fresno library, Romeo curled up in the passenger seat, as if sensing that his human needed space. The sun was beginning to set, casting long golden shadows across the lot. Everything outside was calm, but inside Sundar, a storm raged. He held the envelope like it was made of fire. For the first time in years, he didn't know what step to take next. He had always been the man with the plan, the leader with the vision, the one others looked to for direction. But this journey, this strange, winding, emotional path had broken something inside him. Not in a painful way, but in a necessary way. It had broken the shell. Now he could feel again. After a long breath, he opened the envelope. Inside was a single sheet of paper. No letterhead. No signature. Just two handwritten sentences. You've remembered who you are. Now decide who you want to become. Rebuild the world with your heart this time, not just your mind. Sundar read it 3 times, each time slower than the last. And then he wept. Not because he was sad, but because he was awake. The next day. He did something that startled everyone. He walked into Google's main boardroom 10 minutes early. No entourage. No devices. No tie. Just a simple gray sweater and jeans. He looked. Quiet, but focused. The directors, executives, and assistants all noticed. They greeted him with cautious smiles. He stood at the head of the table and said just one thing. I want to show you something. He pulled out a USB stick, plugged it into the display. The screen lit up, not with slides or charts, but with photos. Photos of Romeo. Of the lake. Of Mount Tamalpais. Of the dusty roads of Chennai. Of the old house. Of Ashwin reading to children. Of the letter. And then finally a blank screen with the words, what kind of world are we building? A silence fell across the room like a thick curtain. People looked at each other, unsure of how to respond. Sundar leaned forward. For years, we've chased speed, efficiency, scale. We've built the smartest algorithms, the fastest processors, the most powerful platforms. But in doing so, we've made one critical mistake. He paused. Everyone leaned in. We forgot the human. He looked around the table, eyes steady. We forgot the single mother working 2 jobs who doesn't have time to learn a new interface. We forgot the farmer in a rural village with limited internet access. We forgot the child with a speech delay trying to talk to a virtual assistant that can't understand him. We built for the masses, not for the one. He took another breath, and it took losing my dog. To find that truth. A few people shifted uncomfortably. Others looked visibly moved. Sundar continued. So, starting today, we change everything. Our next innovation won't be about what we can automate. It'll be about what we can understand. How we can restore empathy to the machine. How we can make kindness the default, not the afterthought. He pointed to the screen. I don't want us to be the smartest company in the world. I want us to be the most human. The room was quiet for a long time, then, slowly, one of the youngest engineers in the back, barely in his 20s, raised his hand. What does that mean in practice, sir? Sundar smiled. It means we're going to rebuild our platforms from the inside out. It means every product team will include someone whose job is to ask one question. How does this help the least heard voice? It means every decision goes through a second filter, not just is it profitable, but also is it kind? Another. Silence dot and then clapping dot, slow dot, hesitant dot, then louder dot, genuine dot. Something was shifting. Not just in the boardroom dot, but in the culture dot, in the heart of the company dot over the next few months. Everything began to change. Google's development teams introduced empathy audits. Reviews not by machines, but by real people from underrepresented communities who provided feedback before any product launch.